G'day guys, and welcome back to our Kart Class Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing how do I get my kids started in go-kart racing. Now, for many parents, their kids are hassling them. They want to become a Formula 1 driver, an IndyCar driver, even a V8 supercar driver. But where did these drivers start out their motor racing career? It was predominantly in kart racing. So for a lot of these kids, they look at the top end of the sport and they think, I really want to one day be racing at Monaco. I want to be racing the Indy 500. I want to race at Bathurst. But to hone your skills at the cheapest cost is kart racing. Now, just straight off the bat, kart racing still isn't a cheap sport. But in motor racing terms, it's the cheapest form of motorsport, especially to hone your skills and to get practice in. Now, whether you're 6 years of age or whether you're 12 years of age or even 15 years of age, you can get into motor racing, get into kart racing. I would say that off the bat, if you're more towards the 15-year-old end of the scale and your ultimate goal is to make it into car racing, I would say spend a limited time in kart racing, because by the time you get good at kart racing, that might take you 2 or 3 years. And the reason for that is that you're racing against some drivers who have been at it for like 7 or 8 years already, since they were 6 or 7. So you might not actually show your true skills just yet, because the kids that you're competing against have a lot more time on these tracks, a lot more time on those tires, a lot more relationships with engine builders, with kart shops, with coaches and so on. But these drivers, although they've got more experience in kart racing, when they jump into a racing car, they're still going to have to learn a lot of those new traits, whether that's suspension, whether it's data, speaking to an engineer. So if you can do a limited time in kart racing, get the basics right, get the fundamentals right, but then try and jump into a racing car at the same time as these more experienced kart racers, you can actually close the gap that way. But going back to our topic on how to get started in karting is, let's find our local karting track. Now, for some people, their local karting track might be 10 minutes away. It might be 1 or 2 hours away. Once you've got your local karting track, let's start to find out whether there's a kart shop located at the facility or if it's close by. Because let's be realistic, when you're starting out a new sport or new hobby, you need to have a good network around you. You're going to need support. You're going to need spare parts. So we want to see where our local kart shop is and then what brand of karts they're selling, because if you start off in a sport which you've got no idea on, and then you go and buy a go-kart that the local shop or the local people around aren't going to be familiar with or have spare parts to, then you're going to find yourself in a bit of a rut straight away, because when things go wrong, people then can't actually chip in to help you out. So once we've got our local club and we've got our local kart shop, obviously we're starting to build a little bit of a network right from there. We want to then see how to get a license. So once we know our local kart club, they'll be able to point you in the direction to the association. Now, in America, there's multiple associations. In Australian karting, there's our Karting Australia, so you have to be a part of that association to get your license and your club membership. For New Zealand, they've got Kart Sport New Zealand. Again, that whole country is association. So once you've got your license, you need to then, for some circuits, be a member of that club also. Now, from an age bracket point of view, our cadet categories are generally ages from 6 to 12 years of age. Now, in that, you can have multiple categories. So for a lot of the countries, they have what they call a micro, which is basically 6 to 9 years of age, and then a mini, which is basically from 9 to 12 years of age. Once drivers turn 12 or a maximum of 13, they look to go into the junior category, which is basically from upwards of 12 to 16 years of age. As I said, from there, some people might want to just stay in go-karting. They'll go into the senior ranks, which is 16 and above. Or if they want to get into car racing, that's probably the good changeover point. So once you're finishing your junior karting career, you can then move into some sort of motor racing, car racing scene. Now, when we're looking at what kart to buy, it sort of went back a little bit to speaking to the local kart shops, because, as I said, you're going to need support. You're going to end up bending stuff. You're going to need front wheel alignments. Your chain's going to come off. Your spark plug's going to foul. Things like that if you're not supporting your local shop, then it's going to be very hard to then just keep bouncing, questions off of these people that you're not really supporting. So have a look around. Go to some club races if it's close by. Get a feel of the local kart shops. Get a feel of the local karting brands that are out there. If you're seeing one or two brands that are predominantly in most of the fields, then that's probably a good starting point. They're competitive. There's a network of people that are using that brand, most likely going to have spare parts, readily available, and there's going to be support then if you've got some questions for your driving. Now, that's what I was talking about. Secondhand karts are a good starting point when you're looking at which kart to buy. Some people can go brand new if the budget, is in that range, because at least when you get a new kart, there's going to be a lot less tendency on mechanical breakdowns, whether it's the engine, whether it's the kart, has it been crashed multiple times, has it been straightened, the bearings could have worn out, just little things that, you don't know the history of. It's the same as buying a secondhand car. You just got no idea, and you're relying on trustworthy people to what you're getting. So let's look at the budgets for, a secondhand car. You're probably going to be looking at between, for a cadet car, which is basically a 60cc engine, kart, seat, tyres, ready to rock and roll, between sort of 4,000 and 5,000, I would think, is a good starting point for a secondhand package. For a new kart package, that's going to be almost doubling, between sort of $8,000 to $9,000 for a new package. Now, as I said, when you're starting out, especially if you're talking about a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kid, they're going to end up in the gravel trap. They're going to scratch the go-kart. They're going to be ending up, they have to learn. So you might want to start off as a secondhand package to see whether your kid likes it. Some circuits have come and try karts. Some circuits you can rent off local kart shops. So see what's readily available. Make sure that your kid is actually half interested and it's not just the parents that are driving this new hobby. Once you've got your kart, now you got to look at the race gear. So the things that are mandatory are you're going to need a helmet, you're going to need race suit, you're going to need gloves, boots, and for our cadets, you're going to need a rib protector. The G-forces that they're experiencing on the track and in their seat, their ribs going to get sore, their neck's going to get sore. So buy decent quality rib protectors from the get-go. I see many people spending like $10,000 on a kart package, and they literally go and spend $150 on a helmet. So, weigh up where your money's spent. You've got, young kids driving at 60 miles an hour, which is basically 95 kilometers an hour on the track. If something were to go wrong, you probably want, a top-end helmet to protect your kid's head. So just have a look at some of the things you're going to buy afterwards. Some of the basic things, honestly, from a race gear point of view, is just buy a tinted visor. It's like wearing sunglasses when you're driving, because if you're driving at these speeds, you want the kids to be able to see. If it's a sunny day and they're literally having to squint their eyes because they can't see where they're going because the sun's in their eyes, we're asking a lot of these young kids. So have a look from a race gear point of view. Make sure you've got a tinted visor, boots and gloves. That's probably things you can actually come a little bit cheaper on, because, quality-wise and the protection-wise, it's probably not as relevant. Race suit-wise, as long as it's like an FIA type suit that's actually, got the credentials to be able to compete, not sort of this, some of these overseas brands out of Asia can be a little bit dodgy sometimes. So just be careful of those suits and the quality of those falling apart, or if something were to go wrong. But that's sort of the main areas for how to get your kids started in kart racing. So once we've found our local kart shop, we've got that ticked off, we'll get our local track. They're the people we should be trying to at least support to get going. Then once we've got our track and our club on board, we've basically got to find the licensing required. For some people, you can just buy a license at that track and you can go racing at your local track. For others, especially in Australia and New Zealand, you've got to have an association, which is the Karting Australia and Kart Sport New Zealand credentials, so the license and the track membership. From our budget point of view, like I said, between $4,000 to $5,000 for a secondhand kart, $8,000 to $10,000 for a new package. Start from a secondhand if that's where your starting point is. That's totally fine. That's where most kids will be getting their career started. Getting your race gear sorted as well. So getting good quality helmet and a tinted visor, and good quality rib protector, because that's sort of going to protect your ribs, which is quite a long-term process to heal if they do get injured. And then you can sort of get a bit cheaper on the boots and gloves if need be. Once you've got that little community going, then it's all about just trying to ask questions when you get to the racetrack, because obviously it's a little bit daunting when you don't know what to do. But there's plenty of people in kart racing, especially for new people, because you're not really competition to them yet. They're more than willing to help out with starting the engine, setting the tire pressures, changing a spark plug, fixing a chain if it's fallen off. Everyone started in the same position as where you might find yourself. So, don't be afraid to ask questions. The karting community is generally very, very good at helping people out. Once you've got your package, you've got to find a way to get it there. That's a bit of a tricky situation for a lot of people, whether that's a trailer, whether that's a van, or in the back of a ute for many people to start off with. But that's something to sort of keep in mind. So now you've got your package, you actually have to get it around to the kart track and storage at home and things like that. So hopefully that's a little bit of intel on how to get started in kart racing. And also, so many people message me on social media, whether that's through my Dave Sera Facebook page, my Kart Class pages as well, because they're nervous, they're stuck. I try and help where I can, at least help guide people to certain shops that I know are very, very helpful and very resourceful, to certain clubs, or at least point them in the right direction. Other times I can't because I don't know the location of these people, I don't know the local shops or anything like that. But if I can be of any assistance, then like I said, it's just a quick message away and I'll try and help you guys out. Thanks for tuning in. If this podcast is beneficial to someone that you may know, then obviously feel free to share it around. And like I said, if you can give it a review, that just sort of keeps our podcast to be seen by more potential motor racing enthusiasts or kart racing, parents and kids as well. So until next time, guys, I appreciate you listening in. Cheers.